Jake Harrison walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber, his black uniform crisp and his face calm, even though his heart was beating fast. The room was huge, bigger than any building he had ever seen on Earth, with walls that seemed to go up forever and strange lights that made everything glow with a soft blue color. Hundreds of alien beings sat in curved rows that formed a giant circle around the center floor where Jake now stood. Lisa Price walked beside him, carrying a small device that recorded everything they saw and heard. She was younger than Jake, but just as serious about their mission. Both humans had spent years preparing for this moment when humanity would ask to join the most powerful organization in the galaxy. The aliens around them looked nothing like humans. Some had skin that looked like glass. Others had too many arms or eyes that glowed in the dark. The Zelthran Prime Minister sat on a throne that floated in the air, his body made of what looked like living crystal that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow colors. He was the leader of this meeting, and everyone waited for him to speak. When the Prime Minister finally opened his mouth, his voice filled the entire chamber without any need for speakers or microphones. "The species called humanity has come before us today," he said, and Jake could hear the coldness in his tone. "They want to become members of our council, to sit among the civilized races of the galaxy and help make decisions that affect billions of lives." Jake straightened his shoulders and looked directly at the Prime Minister, even though the alien's glowing eyes made him feel small and weak. He had practiced this moment many times, but nothing could have prepared him for the feeling of standing before so many powerful beings who clearly thought humans were not good enough to be here. The Prime Minister continued talking, and with each word Jake felt his hope getting smaller. "We have studied your species for many years," the alien said. "We have watched your wars, your violence, your inability to control your emotions. We have seen how you fight each other over small pieces of land, how you destroy your own planet for short-term gain, how you let anger and fear guide your decisions instead of logic and reason." Around the chamber, other aliens began to make sounds that Jake realized was their way of agreeing. The Vorthak representative, a giant bug-like creature with sharp teeth and claws, clicked his mouth parts together in what sounded like laughter. "Your species is too young, too violent, too unstable," the creature said in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "You have not evolved beyond your primitive instincts." Lisa's hand tightened on her recording device, but she kept her face blank and professional. Jake could feel anger starting to build in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Getting angry now would only prove their point about humans being too emotional. A tall, thin alien with silver skin and no hair stood up from his seat. "The humans still wage war against their own kind," he said, his voice high and musical. "They have weapons that could destroy their entire planet, yet they point these weapons at each other. How can we trust such a species with the safety of the galaxy?" More aliens joined in, and soon the chamber was filled with voices all saying the same thing in different ways. Humans were too violent, too emotional, too unpredictable. They had not learned to control their feelings the way civilized species had. They were still too much like animals to be trusted with important decisions. Jake listened to it all, his face showing nothing even though inside he felt like he was being hit over and over again. These aliens spoke about humans like they were talking about dangerous pets that might bite at any moment. They talked about human emotions like they were a disease that needed to be cured. The Zelthran Prime Minister raised one crystal hand and the chamber became quiet again. "We do not reject humanity out of cruelty," he said, and Jake could hear the fake kindness in his voice. "We simply recognize that your species is not ready for the responsibilities that come with council membership. Perhaps in 1,000 years, when you have learned to control your violent nature and think with logic instead of emotion, we might consider your request again." The chamber erupted in what Jake now realized was alien laughter. Different species made different sounds, but they were all mocking humanity in their own way. Some made clicking noises, others hummed or whistled, and a few just stared with eyes that glowed brighter when they were amused. Jake felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach, but he kept his voice steady when he spoke. "We understand your decision," he said, and he was proud that his words came out clear and strong. "We thank you for your time and consideration. But the Prime Minister was not finished. He leaned forward on his floating throne, his crystal face catching the light as he delivered one final insult. "Let me be very clear about something, human," he said, and now his voice carried the sharp edge of someone who wanted to make sure his words cut deep. "We are not simply postponing your membership. We are telling you that your species is fundamentally weak. You would break under the first sign of real danger. When true adversity comes to the galaxy, species like yours simply crumble and disappear." The alien continued, his words hitting Jake like physical blows. "Your emotions make you unstable. Your tendency toward violence makes you dangerous to those around you. Your inability to think logically makes you useless in crisis situations. These are not temporary problems that will go away with time. These are basic flaws in your species that make you unsuitable for civilized society." Jake nodded once, a short, sharp movement of his head. "Thank you for making your position so clear," he said. And Lisa noticed something in his voice that made her look at him more carefully. There was something almost like amusement there, hidden under the polite words. As they turned to leave the chamber, Jake felt the eyes of hundreds of aliens watching them go. He could hear whispered conversations starting up behind them, probably discussing how foolish humans were to think they could join such an advanced civilization. But as they walked toward the exit, Lisa saw something that the aliens had missed. Jake was smiling, just a small curve of his lips that appeared for only a second before disappearing again. It was not the smile of someone who had been defeated. It was the smile of someone who had just learned something very important about his enemies. The massive doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder, cutting off the noise from the chamber. Jake and Lisa walked down the long hallway in silence, both of them thinking about what had just happened. The aliens thought they had put humanity in its place, shown them how weak and unworthy they were. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council had rejected humanity, and Kate Morgan was sitting in her command chair on Earth's most secret space station when the first reports started coming in. The station hung in the darkness between Earth and Mars, hidden from most sensors and known only to the highest levels of human military command. Kate had been an admiral for 15 years, but she had never seen anything like what was appearing on her screens now. Ryan Blake stood at the communications station, his face getting paler with each message that came through their systems. "Admiral," he said, his voice tight with worry, "we're getting distress signals from the Outer Rim territories. Multiple star systems are reporting attacks by unknown forces." Kate leaned forward in her chair, studying the tactical display that showed the galaxy spread out like a map made of lights. Red dots were appearing faster than she could count them, each one representing a world or space station that had suddenly gone silent. "Show me the pattern," she ordered, and Ryan's fingers moved quickly over his controls. The display changed, showing the timeline of attacks over the past week. Kate felt her stomach drop as she realized what she was looking at. Whatever was attacking these worlds was moving in a straight line toward the center of the galaxy, consuming everything in its path like a fire burning through dry grass. "Admiral," called out Lieutenant Sandra Kim from the sensor station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Zelthran homeworld. They're requesting immediate assistance from all spacefaring species." Kate almost laughed at the irony, but there was nothing funny about what she was seeing on her screens. 3 months ago, the Zelthrans had called humanity too weak and violent to join their precious council. Now they were begging for help from anyone who could hold a weapon. "Put it through," she ordered, and the main screen filled with the image of the Zelthran Prime Minister. The crystal being who had been so arrogant and dismissive just months before now looked desperate and afraid. His usual bright glow had faded to a dull flicker, and Kate could see cracks running through his crystal skin. "To all civilized species of the galaxy," the Prime Minister said, his voice carrying none of the authority it had held during the council meeting, "we face a threat unlike anything in recorded history. The ancient enemy known as the Devourers has returned from the void beyond our galaxy. Their world ships are consuming entire star systems, converting all matter into energy to fuel their expansion." Kate watched as the transmission showed images from the attacked systems. What she saw made her feel sick to her stomach. Entire planets had been stripped bare. Their surfaces turned to smooth metal that reflected no light. Space stations had been torn apart and rebuilt into strange geometric shapes that hurt to look at. Most horrifying of all, there were no survivors. Anywhere the Devourers had passed. Ryan turned from his station with a new report. "Admiral, we're getting tactical data from the Council fleets that engaged the enemy. It's not good news." Kate studied the battle reports that appeared on her screen and felt a chill run down her spine. The Galactic Council had sent their most advanced warships against the Devourers, vessels that could destroy moons with a single shot and move faster than light itself. The enemy had swatted them aside like insects. "Their technology adapts," she said, reading the reports out loud. "Energy shields that learn from each attack and become stronger. Hull armor that repairs itself faster than weapons can damage it, and firepower that can crack a planet in half." Emma Carter burst through the command center doors, her lab coat flying behind her and her arms full of data tablets and computer drives. She was Earth's best expert on alien technology, and Kate had never seen her look so excited and terrified at the same time. "Admiral, I've been analyzing every piece of data we have on these Devourers," Emma said, dropping her tablets on the nearest table and bringing up holographic displays that filled the air around them. "The Council species don't understand what they're really fighting." Kate stood up from her command chair and walked over to examine Emma's displays. The images showed Devourer ships that looked like nothing she had ever seen before. They were not built like normal spacecraft with obvious engines and weapons. Instead, they looked almost alive, with surfaces that moved and changed shape as she watched. "Explain," Kate ordered, and Emma's fingers danced through the holographic controls to bring up new images. "Every species in the Galactic Council has evolved past what they consider primitive emotions," Emma said, her words coming fast as her excitement grew. "The Zelthrons make all their decisions through pure logic and mathematical calculations. The Vorthak operate on instinct-driven hierarchies, where every action is predetermined by genetic programming. The Meridians use a collective consciousness where individual thoughts are immediately shared and analyzed by their entire species." Kate began to understand where Emma was going with this, and she felt something that might have been hope starting to grow in her chest. "They're all predictable," she said. "Exactly," Emma replied, bringing up brain scan images that showed the neural patterns of different alien species. "Look at these patterns. Zelthron thought processes follow perfect mathematical sequences. Vorthak neural activity runs in predetermined loops. Every Council species thinks in patterns that can be calculated and predicted." Kate looked at the alien brain scans, and then at the human brain scans that Emma displayed next to them. Where the alien patterns were smooth and regular, the human patterns looked like chaos itself. They jumped and spiked and changed direction without warning, creating shapes that seemed to follow no rules at all. "The Devourer's adaptive technology is designed to counter logical, predictable responses," Emma continued. "Their computers analyze enemy tactics and develop countermeasures based on mathematical probabilities. They've been doing this for millions of years, consuming galaxy after galaxy." Ryan looked up from his communication station with new reports. "Admiral, the Council just lost their 4th major fleet. The Devourers are now 3 star systems away from Zelthran Prime. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach the Council's capital worlds within 18 hours. Kate felt the weight of the entire galaxy settling on her shoulders. The most advanced civilizations in known space were being destroyed like children's toys. And now everyone was looking to humanity for salvation. The same humanity that had been called too weak and emotional to join their council. "What makes you think we can do what they can't?" Kate asked Emma, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Emma smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that their greatest weakness might actually be their greatest strength. "Because we're not logical, Admiral. We're not predictable. When we fight, we don't follow mathematical formulas or genetic programming. We adapt and change and do things that make no sense to anyone, including ourselves." Kate looked around her command center at the faces of her crew. She saw fear there, but she also saw determination and anger and a dozen other emotions that the Council species had evolved past. She saw humans being gloriously, chaotically human. The Devourers have never faced a species that fights with controlled insanity, Emma said, and now her voice carried an edge of fierce pride. They've never encountered an enemy that can be logical one moment and completely irrational the next. Their adaptive systems won't know how to respond to opponents who change tactics every 30 seconds, based on nothing more than gut feelings and desperate inspiration. Kate sat back down in her command chair and looked at the galaxy map where red dots continued to multiply as more systems fell to the Devourers. The Council species had called humanity weak because they couldn't control their emotions, because they were too chaotic and unpredictable to be trusted with civilized society. Now those same qualities might be the only thing standing between the galaxy and total destruction. Kate opened a communication channel to Earth's military command and began issuing orders that would mobilize every human ship and soldier for the fight of their lives. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes what looks like weakness is actually strength waiting for the right moment to show itself. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a facility that existed on no official maps and in no government records, Colonel Steve Murphy walked through corridors that hummed with the sound of humanity's greatest secret. The walls were lined with laboratories and training rooms where the best and brightest of the human race had been working for years on something the Galactic Council never knew existed. The adaptive combat protocol had been born from humanity's greatest shame and greatest strength. While other species had evolved past their primitive emotions, humans had learned to weaponize theirs. Steve had spent 15 years developing training methods that taught soldiers how to think like predators one moment, and philosophers the next, how to switch between chaos and order faster than any computer could track. Emma Carter stood in the main laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays that showed brain scans, combat simulations, and psychological profiles. She looked up as Steve entered, her eyes bright with the excitement of someone who had just solved an impossible puzzle. "Colonel, I've been running comparisons between human neural patterns and those of every council species," she said, gesturing to the displays around her. "The differences are even more dramatic than we thought." Steve moved to examine the brain scans that floated in the air around them. The alien patterns looked like perfect geometric shapes, beautiful in their symmetry and predictability. The human patterns looked like storms made of lightning, chaotic and wild and impossible to predict. "Show me the combat simulations," he ordered, and Emma's fingers moved through the holographic controls to bring up new displays. The screens filled with footage from training exercises where human soldiers faced off against computer opponents, programmed to fight like council species. Steve watched as his troops adapted and changed their tactics in ways that made the alien fighting styles look slow and clumsy by comparison. The Zelthrans calculate optimal tactics and stick to them throughout an entire battle, Emma explained as they watched one simulation. "Our people change their approach every few minutes based on nothing more than instinct and experience." General Patricia Lewis entered the laboratory, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. She had been in charge of Earth's military research programs for 20 years, and she had never seen anything like what her scientists were showing her. "Explain to me why our emotional instability is suddenly an advantage," she said, and Steve could hear the skepticism in her voice. Emma brought up a new display that showed brain activity during combat situations. "Every other species in the Koi galaxy has evolved past what they consider primitive emotions," she said. "They see our ability to feel fear, rage, hope, and determination all at the same time as a weakness that makes us unstable and unreliable." Steve stepped forward to point at specific patterns in the brain scans. "But those emotions aren't weaknesses, General. They're tools that allow us to process information and adapt to new situations faster than any purely logical species could manage." General Lewis studied the displays with the careful attention of someone who had spent her life analyzing military intelligence. "Give me specifics," she ordered. Emma pulled up combat footage from human military training exercises. "Watch how our soldiers respond to unexpected situations," she said. "When a Zelthran encounters something outside their calculated parameters, they stop to recalculate their optimal response. That takes time, sometimes several seconds." The footage showed human soldiers facing surprise attacks and changing their tactics instantly, moving from defensive positions to aggressive assaults without any pause for calculation or analysis. Our people don't stop to think, Steve added. Fear makes them faster, anger makes them more aggressive, hope keeps them fighting when logic says they should surrender. They adapt in real time because their emotions are constantly feeding them new information and new possibilities. Captain Jenny Foster entered the laboratory, still wearing her zero-G marine combat gear from a training exercise. She was the leader of humanity's elite space combat forces, and she had been testing the new tactical protocols for months. General, I've been running my teams through scenarios based on Devourer combat patterns, she reported. The enemy's adaptive. Technology is designed to counter logical, predictable responses, but when we throw logic out the window and fight on pure instinct, their systems can't keep up. General Lewis looked at the data streaming across the displays around them. Reports from the front lines showed that Council fleets were being destroyed, faster than they could be replaced. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were falling to an enemy that could adapt to any logical response. The Devourers have been consuming galaxies for millions of years, Emma said, bringing up historical data about the ancient enemy. They've faced every possible type of logical, calculated resistance. Their technology has evolved to counter mathematical tactics and predictable strategies. Steve activated a holographic display that showed human combat doctrine. But they've never faced a species that can be completely logical one moment and completely chaotic the next, he said. Our soldiers can switch between careful planning and wild improvisation faster than their adaptive systems can analyze and respond. Jenny Foster grinned with the fierce pride of someone who had spent her life learning to fight impossible odds. We've been training for this our entire history, General. Every war we've fought against each other has taught us something new about unpredictable combat. We've learned to be chaos incarnate when we need to be. Emma brought up footage from recent council battles against the Devourers. Look at how the enemy responds to different tactics, she said. When the Zelthrons use mathematical precision, the Devourers adapt and counter with mathematical precision. When the Vorthak use instinct-driven attacks, the Devourers respond with instinct-driven defenses. General Lewis watched the footage and began to understand what her people were trying to tell her. They mirror their opponents, she said. Exactly, Steve replied. But what happens when they try to mirror an opponent who refuses to stay the same for more than a few seconds? What happens when they face an enemy that can be logical, emotional, chaotic, and organized all within the span of a single battle? The answer came from Jenny Foster, who had spent years learning to fight in ways that defied conventional military wisdom. Their systems overload, she said. They can't adapt to something that's constantly changing because they were designed to find patterns and exploit them. We don't follow patterns. Emma pulled up the latest reports from the Council fleets. The Devourers just destroyed another major fleet group. They're now 2 systems away from Zelthran Prime. The Council is requesting immediate assistance from any species capable of space combat. General Lewis looked around at the faces of her top military personnel and scientists. 3 months ago, the Galactic Council had called humanity too weak and emotional to join their civilized society. Now they were begging for help from the same species they had dismissed as primitive and unstable. How long do we have to prepare? She asked. Steve checked the tactical displays that showed Devourer movement patterns. 18 hours until they reach the Council's core worlds, he said. If we're going to prove that humanity isn't weak, this is our chance. General Lewis nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what they were about to attempt. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had failed against this enemy. Now it was up to the species that was too emotional, too chaotic, and too unpredictable to be trusted with civilized responsibility. Activate all combat protocols, she ordered. Contact Admiral Morgan and tell her to prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. It's time to show the galaxy that our weaknesses have always been our greatest strengths. As alarms began to sound, throughout the facility and personnel rushed to their battle stations, Emma looked at the brain scan displays one more time. The chaotic patterns of human neural activity looked like storms and lightning, wild and unpredictable and beautiful in their complete refusal to follow any rules. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most civilized thing you can do is embrace your primitive nature and fight like the apex predator that evolution made you to be. Admiral Kate Morgan stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as her ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and what she saw there made her understand why the Galactic Council fleets had been losing so badly. 3. Massive structures hung in space ahead of them, each one the size of a small moon and covered in metal, that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. These were the Devourer world ships, and they were surrounded by smaller vessels that moved like a school of predatory fish. The system that had once contained 4 inhabited planets and dozens of space stations was now nothing but debris and empty space. The Devourers had consumed everything, breaking down matter at the molecular level and converting it into energy and raw materials for their endless expansion. Bobby Chen looked up from his sensor station, his young face pale with shock at what his instruments were showing him. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy signatures from all 3 world ships," he reported. "Each one is putting out more power than our entire fleet combined." Kate nodded grimly as she studied the tactical displays that surrounded her command chair. The human expeditionary fleet consisted of 47 ships, ranging from massive battle cruisers down to small frigates that other species considered barely worthy of deep space travel. Compared to the Council's gleaming super dreadnoughts, human ships looked small and crude, built for speed and flexibility rather than overwhelming firepower. "Contact from the Council fleet," reported Lieutenant Amy Walsh from the communications station. "They're maintaining position at maximum weapons range and requesting coordination for a joint assault." Kate looked at the display showing the Council ships. Even after losing 4 major fleets to the Devourers, they still had more firepower than humanity could field. Their vessels were works of art as much as instruments of war, with hulls that gleamed like mirrors and weapon systems that could destroy asteroids from halfway across the star system. "Put me through to their fleet commander," Kate ordered, and the main screen filled with the image of a Zelthran admiral whose crystal features were cracked with stress and exhaustion. "Admiral Morgan," the alien said, and Kate could hear the desperation in his perfectly modulated voice. "Our preliminary attacks have proven ineffective. The enemy's adaptive shielding neutralizes our weapons within minutes of engagement. Do you have any tactical suggestions?" Kate watched through the view screen as the Council fleet began their assault. Beams of pure energy lanced out from their ships, each one powerful enough to vaporize a city. The weapons struck the Devourer world ships, and for a moment Kate thought they might actually damage the massive vessels. Then the enemy shields began to adapt. Kate watched in fascination and horror as the Devourer defenses analyzed the incoming fire and started to change their molecular structure to absorb and redirect the energy. Within minutes, weapons that had seemed devastatingly effective were doing no damage at all. "Admiral Morgan," the Zelthran commander called out, his voice rising with panic as his fleet's weapons became useless. "Our computational analysis suggests a coordinated withdrawal to regroup and develop new tactical approaches." Kate smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Negative, Admiral," she said, opening a channel to her entire fleet. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Morgan. Implement Protocol Chaos immediately. Show them what we learned fighting each other for 10,000 years. Carl Wright commanded the destroyer squadron from his ship, the UES Hurricane, and he grinned fiercely as he heard Kate's orders. His ships were among the smallest in the fleet, fast and lightly armored vessels that the Council species had dismissed as inadequate for capital ship combat. "All destroyers, break formation and engage at will," he ordered, and immediately, his ships scattered in every direction like startled birds. To the watching Council commanders, it looked like panic and confusion. To the Devourer's tactical computers, it was incomprehensible. The human ships moved in patterns that defied every rule of space combat doctrine. They spiraled and dove and climbed through 3-dimensional space in ways that made no mathematical sense. Some ships flew directly at the enemy guns, while others approached from impossible angles that should have left them vulnerable to concentrated fire. Tony Davis led his frigate squadron in an attack that would have been considered suicidal by any conventional military analysis. His tiny ships, each one smaller than a Council shuttle, swarmed around the closest world ship like angry insects attacking a giant. The massive Devourer weapons tried to track them, but the targeting systems couldn't calculate firing solutions for targets that moved so unpredictably. The enemy shields are trying to adapt to our attack patterns, reported Lieutenant Susan Parker from the tactical station on the Defiance. But our ships keep changing their approach vectors before the adaptive systems can compensate. Kate watched the battle unfold on her tactical displays and felt a fierce pride in her people. Human ships darted between the massive world ships, striking from angles that should have been impossible and vanishing before return fire could be calculated. They fought like wolves attacking a herd of giants, using speed and cunning to overcome. Superior size and strength. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded a squadron of heavy cruisers that the Council admirals had expected to engage the enemy in traditional long-range artillery duels. Instead, she led her ships in a spiraling attack pattern that brought them dangerously close to the Devourer vessels before unleashing devastating close-range barrages. Rodriguez to all ships, she transmitted as her squadron wove through a storm of enemy fire. Remember your training. The moment they start to predict your movements, change everything. Make them think you're running away, then turn around and hit them from behind. The Devourer adaptive shields that had so easily neutralized the Council's mathematical precision were struggling to cope with the constantly shifting human tactics. Every time their computers began to analyze a pattern of attack, the humans would suddenly switch to completely different methods of assault. Emma Carter monitored the battle from Earth's Deep Space Command Center, watching as her theories about human adaptability were proven correct in the most dramatic way possible. "Admiral, the Devourer ships are trying to match our unpredictability," she reported through the communication link. "But their machine logic can't truly embrace chaos." Sarah Phillips led the Stealth Reconnaissance Wing, small ships equipped with advanced sensors and cloaking devices that allowed them to get close to the enemy without being detected. Her job was to study the Devourer responses and look for patterns that could be exploited. "Admiral, I'm seeing something interesting," she reported as her ship ghosted through the debris field created by the ongoing battle. "The Devourers are developing predictable responses to our unpredictable attacks. They're creating patterns in their attempts to counter our chaos." Kate felt a surge of understanding as she realized what Sarah was telling her. The enemy's greatest strength was also becoming their weakness. "All ships, prepare to implement Protocol Predator," she ordered. "They think they understand our chaos now. Time to show them that humans can be coldly logical when we choose to be." The change in human tactics was so sudden and complete that even the Council observers were stunned. Ships that had been moving in wild, chaotic patterns suddenly began to fly with mechanical precision. The swarm attacks became coordinated strikes. The apparent confusion became calculated destruction. Betty Anderson commanded the heavy cruiser squadron that had been waiting for this moment. Her ships had been hanging back from the main battle, letting the smaller vessels confuse and disorient the enemy. Now they moved forward with the cold efficiency of executioners. "All ships, concentrated. Fire on the primary world ship," she ordered. "Target the areas where their adaptive shields are showing stress fractures from trying to counter too many different attack patterns." The largest Devourer world ship found itself caught in an impossible situation. Its adaptive systems had been programmed to match and counter enemy tactics, but the humans had given it contradictory data. The ship's computers were trying to adapt to chaos and order simultaneously, and the resulting system conflicts were tearing apart its defenses from within. Kate watched as the massive enemy vessel began to show signs of critical system failure. Lights flickered across its hull as internal explosions sent ripples through its adaptive armor. The other Devourer ships tried to assist their flagship, but found themselves facing the same tactical dilemma. "The enemy's adaptive shielding is failing," reported Bobby Chen from his sensor station. "Their systems are overloading trying to process contradictory tactical data." Kate opened a channel to her entire fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Morgan," she said, her voice carrying across space to every human vessel in the battle. "Show the galaxy what human persistence looks like. These machines thought they could consume our civilization because we were too emotional and chaotic to fight effectively. Prove them wrong." The human fleet converged on the crippled world ship like a pack of predators closing in for the kill. Every ship contributed to the final assault, from the massive battle cruisers down to the smallest frigates. They fired with the cold precision of machines and the fierce determination of warriors defending their home. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, Jake Harrison walked through the same massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber. But everything about this moment was different from his first visit. The aliens who had once looked at him with dismissive contempt now watched him with something that might have been respect or perhaps fear. The chamber that had once echoed with mocking laughter was now silent, except for the soft hum of alien breathing and the whisper of environmental systems. The Zelthran Prime Minister sat on his floating throne, but the crystal being who had been so arrogant just months before looked like he had aged 1,000 years. His body, once bright and gleaming, now showed deep cracks that ran through his crystalline structure like scars. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the condescending authority it had held during Jake's first appearance. "Ambassador Harrison," the Prime Minister said, and Jake could hear genuine humility in the alien's tone. "The Galactic Council wishes to formally apologize for our previous assessment of humanity's capabilities. We were wrong about your species in ways that nearly cost us everything." Jake stood in the center of the chamber where he had been insulted and dismissed just 6 months earlier. This time, he was not alone. Admiral Kate Morgan stood beside him, wearing the uniform of the newly created Galactic Defense Command. Behind them stood representatives from every branch of human military and scientific services, including Emma Carter and Colonel Steve Murphy. "We appreciate the apology, Prime Minister," Jake said, his voice calm and diplomatic despite the satisfaction he felt at seeing the aliens' discomfort. "However, we've learned something important from this experience, and we think you have too, RED." Vorthak representative, the giant bug-like creature who had once mocked humanity's violent nature, clicked his mandibles in the gesture his species used to show submission. "We called your people weak because they were different from us," he said in his grinding metal voice. "We did not understand that their difference was exactly what the galaxy needed." Kate stepped forward, and her presence seemed to fill the enormous chamber despite her relatively small human size. She had become something of a legend throughout the galaxy, the admiral who had done what no council fleet could accomplish. Stories of the Battle of Kepler 442 had spread to every civilized world, growing in the telling until some versions claimed the humans had destroyed entire devourer fleets with nothing but small fighters and pure determination. The galaxy spent thousands of years believing that strength meant eliminating emotions, controlling every variable, making every decision through pure logic, Kate said, her words carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "You created the most advanced civilizations in galactic history by following those principles." She paused, looking around at the assembled alien representatives who hung on her every word. "But when you faced an enemy that could adapt to logical responses, your greatest strengths became weaknesses. You needed something you had evolved past, something you had trained yourselves to consider primitive and dangerous." Emma Carter moved to activate a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with images from the battle. The aliens watched in fascination as human ships moved through space in patterns that defied conventional tactical analysis, striking the massive devourer vessels from impossible angles and vanishing before return fire could be calculated. Our emotional volatility, our capacity for both chaos and order, our tendency to fight each other over seemingly trivial matters, Emma said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had solved one of the galaxy's greatest puzzles. These weren't weaknesses to be overcome. They were tools that made us strong enough to face what others couldn't. The display showed the moment when the largest devourer world ship had suffered its critical system failure, its adaptive defenses overwhelmed by contradictory tactical data. Several alien representatives made sounds of amazement as they watched the massive vessel tear itself apart from within. Colonel Murphy stepped forward to address the council about the broader implications of what had happened. "Every species in this chamber has evolved to be predictable in some way," he said. "Your logic is mathematical and precise. Your instincts follow genetic programming. Your collective consciousness operates through shared analysis. All of these are strengths, but they're also limitations." The Meridian representative, a pale humanoid whose species shared a collective consciousness, spoke for the first time in the session. You are saying that our advancement made us vulnerable, she said, her voice carrying the harmonized tones of thousands of minds thinking as one. Not vulnerable, Jake corrected. Specialized. You became incredibly good at specific types of thinking and problem solving. But when you faced a problem that required a different approach, you had no way to adapt. Kate brought up new displays showing the current state of galactic defenses. After the Battle of Kepler 442, the Devourers had retreated to the galactic rim, but intelligence reports suggested they were regrouping and adapting their tactics. The next attack would be different and possibly more dangerous. The Devourers will return, Kate said, and several aliens made sounds of distress at this confirmation of their fears. They've been consuming galaxies for millions of years, and they learn from every defeat. When they come back, they'll have developed countermeasures for human unpredictability. The Zelthran Prime Minister leaned forward on his throne, his cracked features showing concern. Then how do we prepare for their return? He asked. Jake smiled, and this time it was not the predatory expression he had worn when leaving the chamber 6 months ago. This was the smile of someone who had found a solution to an impossible problem. By learning from each other, he said, the galaxy doesn't need humanity to replace the council species. It needs all of us working together, combining our different strengths. Emma activated new displays showing theoretical combat formations that mixed council precision with human adaptability. Imagine Zelthran mathematical analysis combined with human tactical flexibility, she said. Picture Vorthak, instinct-driven, aggression guided by meridian collective consciousness and human emotional intelligence. The chamber buzzed with alien conversations as representatives began to understand what the humans were proposing. Instead of humanity joining the existing council structure, they were suggesting a complete reformation of galactic civilization based on cooperation between different types of intelligence. Admiral Morgan brought up tactical projections showing how combined fleets might perform against adapted devourer forces. Your logical precision can identify optimal strategies, she said to the Zelthran delegation. Our chaos can implement those strategies in unpredictable ways. Vorthak aggression can provide the killing instinct while meridian coordination ensures no ship fights alone. The transformation of the Galactic Council took months of negotiation and planning. But when it was complete, the galaxy had something it had never possessed before: true diversity of thought in its leadership. The new Galactic Defense Command included representatives from every spacefaring species, with humans serving not as replacements for existing leadership, but as catalysts that helped other species reach their full potential. Jake found himself appointed as the first human council representative, a position that would have been unthinkable just a year earlier. As he took his seat in the restructured chamber, he reflected on the journey that had brought humanity from rejection to acceptance to leadership. The chamber looked different now, with new seating arrangements that encouraged interaction between species, rather than the old hierarchical structure. Human officers worked alongside alien commanders, sharing tactical knowledge and learning from each other's strengths. Kate Morgan, now Supreme Admiral of the combined galactic fleets, stood before the assembled representatives to deliver her first report on the new defense preparations. The Devourers taught us something important, she said. Strength doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being adaptable, from being willing to change and grow and learn from others. She activated displays showing the current state of galactic defenses. Human unpredictability had been combined with alien precision to create something entirely new. Fleets that could switch between mathematical precision and controlled chaos at will. Tactics that combined logical analysis with emotional intuition. Strategies that no enemy could fully predict or counter. When the Devourers return, they'll face something they've never encountered in millions of years of conquest, Kate said. Not just one species fighting alone, but an entire galaxy united in its diversity. They called us weak because we were different from each other. Now our differences have become our greatest strength. The Zelthran Prime Minister, his crystal structure showing new growth where the cracks had been, spoke for the entire council. We have learned that true strength comes not from eliminating our weaknesses, but from understanding how our weaknesses can become strengths when combined with the abilities of others. Jake looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of species, all working together toward a common goal. The aliens who had once called humanity too emotional and chaotic to be trusted now valued those very qualities as essential to their survival.